Well, we begin with breaking news coming in. The Indian Navy, well, it's been rocked by another charge of sexual harassment. This time around, the explosive charges were leveled against a senior commander by a young woman lieutenant. The victim in this case, a commissioned officer under the Short Service Commission, she has alleged that she, when serving, was subjected to physical, verbal and mental harassment by her senior. Now, as per sources, the alleged incident took place while the victim was under training at the Shipwright School in Vizag, where the Navy's Eastern Naval Command is located. The harassed woman officer had even allegedly attempted suicide. As per the victim, the officer in charge, a commander rank official, allegedly began displaying advances towards her which were resisted. Now, these incidents allegedly occurred between the time frame of December 2012 to June 2013 while she was in Vizag in service. The victim was backed by another woman officer and a civilian lady staff at the same place who accused the commander rank official of harassment. Now, based on her complaint, the Navy appointed a one-man inquiry followed by a board of inquiry and general court-martial. Of the 5 charges leveled and investigated, the Navy stated that only one charge of cruelty, and that's the operative part of all the 5 charges which were leveled, only one charge of cruelty and conduct unbecoming of an officer stuck. The accused was punished with forfeiture of 18 months seniority and consequential penalties. After the court-martial, the victim quit the Navy, which made sure she repaid the entire training expense before resigning. Pertinent questions which this particular news break puts forth, and my colleague Jugal Purohit, who's been working on the story for the last few days, looking at it every angle, only then we've come out and reported the story. He's joining us live in the studio. Jugal, for the benefit of our viewers who are joining us, can you please take us through the nuances, the modalities of this particular allegation?
Well, Preeti, to begin with, the lady who we are talking about is no longer a part of the Indian Navy. She had joined as a Short Service Commission officer, and her stream was naval architecture essentially, which means that she was aiming to, in future design warships for the Indian Navy. An extremely bright girl, I understand. All of this took place when she was actually at the Shipwright School, as you mentioned, and for 6 to 7 months she had, I'm given to understand, recounted specific charges, specific instances of physical, mental and verbal harassment. Of course, the Navy on its side, as soon as it received this complaint, it initiated the process, and surprisingly, this lady was joined by one more lady officer of the Indian Navy as well as a civilian staffer there. All of whom made similar remarks and similar complaints against this particular commander of the Indian Navy who was officiating at that time. Preeti, at the end of the entire process, which included a court-martial, one doesn't know, because court-martial proceedings are secret. They are not accessible by any means whatsoever. One doesn't know what are the arguments, what did the inquiry find, but the fact is that the Navy says that these 3 women coming together could not give enough evidence to nail this officer.
That prompts me to my next question, Jugal, because these are grave charges in the first place. On one account, you're saying that out of the 5 charges which have been leveled against this accused, the officer accused, only one has stuck. Now, if in that case, either you haven't investigated the issue properly, because there were 3 women who were better given a statement saying that they were harassed. If this is all a creation, that's what some people are saying, by this particular woman who is alleging this particular incident, why did they not investigate these 3 other women?
Precisely, Preeti, that precisely is actually the point where there are actually no easy answers either ways. During the course of investigating the entire issue, I did have an interaction with several senior people who have dealt with this case, and when this particular question was put to them, we were given to understand that, well, the court-martial proceedings are secret, no one can really access, and that's where the matter ends. But it doesn't actually end there, because insofar as this action is concerned, if 3 women have lied, then perhaps the Navy should be moving against them to ensure that the officer is not conspired against and falsely implicated, but that's not happening. In fact, Preeti, if I may add, the family of this particular victim extremely distressed right now. In fact, as you just said, she also allegedly attempted suicide some time back. And one more important point, Preeti, is that she wanted to actually leave the Indian Navy. It's not an easy organization to join. Only the best get in, and that's how it should be. She wanted to quit the Navy, but the Navy asked her to hang around because the process was going on and her absence would affect that. She stuck on because of that request. But now, as I see it, and as we understand from sources close to her, she's extremely disappointed by the fact that she doesn't believe that any degree of justice has been done towards her.
We'd also want to clarify at this point of time that this lady in particular, who was once a serving lieutenant in the Indian Navy, does not want to pursue this case further. We want to clarify that, but that doesn't take away from the fact that this particular case raises pertinent questions that the Navy needs to answer. The Indian Navy has in fact reacted to the Headlines Today report, and I'd like to take our viewers through that. In a statement which names the official, the Navy admits that the young woman officer had lodged a complaint against Commander Anand Bhupati. This is what the Navy states. The Navy also admits that court-martial found Commander Anand Bhupati culpable on charges of cruelty and conduct unbecoming the character of an officer. The Navy has also justified recovery of training charges from the victim under the existing law. It adds that a proposal for waiver of training charges has been forwarded to the Ministry of Defence, and the amount will now be refunded if there is an approval. All right, once again, I'd like to cut across to Jugal before we are joined in the studio by Karuna Nandi, senior lawyer, Supreme Court. We are also joined by retired Commodore GJ Singh. He's joining us. He's the former Navy officer, President Ex-Servicemen League. He's joining us from our Bangalore studios. But before we go for a quick response by the Navy, I'd like to cut across to Jugal once again, who's been tracking the story for the last 1 week. And only after verifying all possible facts on it have we reported this story. Jugal, can you quickly take us through the naval response?
Well, Preeti, it's, the Navy is basically trying to tell us that they've made a very, very honest attempt at trying and investigating the entire case. They said that they've even provided, with some degree of difficulty, a woman prosecutor to this victim, and that the Navy believes that it has absolutely nothing to hide whatsoever. One must admit that the Navy was also, in that sense, trying to go that much extra a mile to give us a real understanding of the issue. But Preeti, I must also quickly add that there are several discrepancies that we found by speaking and understanding what the complainant had to say and what has actually transpired in this court-martial proceedings. During the course of investigation, there were several such discrepancies which emerged, to which there is absolutely no answer. As I said, everything ends at the point that it's a court-martial, everything is secret, and we can't tell you anything more than that.
But ultimately, it is the dignity of a woman in question, and I'd like to bring in Karuna Nandi, senior lawyer, Supreme Court here. Karuna, we understand that this is a court-martial, it's done behind closed doors, but the question that we can't understand, which is pertinently being raised here, is that 3 women got together. There was this one particular woman who said, lodged an official complaint that she was sexually, verbally, physically, emotionally harassed. She was supported by 2 other women. Isn't that enough?
Having not gone into the evidence in this particular case, I think it's difficult for me to say whether conviction on various charges was justified or not. When you look at the process, though, in this case, I'm wondering why the Navy does not have committees and people who are in accordance with the sexual harassment law. Now, whether or not they are covered by this law itself, and there does not seem to me to be any explicit exemption in the law. What it says here is that a workplace includes any department, organization, etc., which is established, owned, controlled, wholly or substantially financed by funds provided directly or indirectly by the government, right? So unless there is a special law that exempts the Navy in this regard, or even if there is,
Which we can't seem to find that.
So unless, and even if there is a special law that exempts the Navy in this regard, right? Clearly, in principle, that has to be brought in accordance with this law. When we have a number of women joining the Navy, when women's rights to work and right to life is affected. So in this particular case, what do we see? We see a situation where a young woman has complained of sexual harassment against a senior officer. sometimes, you know, the false bogey or false, false charges and false
Right.
cases and motivated
But if they're motivated, then they should be investigated.
allegations are raised, right? But here we have two other women who then subsequently come forward and make
Yes.
another complaint. We also know, if we look at the AFSPA, if we even look at the other example that you raised, I think, of stealing affections of the wife of another officer, right? If you look at the way these structures in our armed forces are set up, they are, yes, they are to be lauded. They do incredibly important and difficult work. And yes, you know, they are some of our most disciplined cadres. But
Okay.
when you look at them in terms of fairness to some of their officials, that doesn't quite happen,
like to
right?
bring in- yeah,
it's very
but-
patriarchal.
We'd like to bring in Commodore GJ Singh, former Navy officer, now President, ex-Servicemen League. Commodore, the question we'd like to ask you is, you know, when we talk about respect, dignity of women in public spaces, in terms of when they go out to work, everybody comes out very strongly for their rights. Why is it there's a wail which comes forth when a sexual harassment charge comes maybe in the Army or the Navy, right? A prime example that we're quoting here, sir.
You see, at the outset, I would like to, quote a timeless truth here, that this mental torture, sexual harassment, or sexual advances made in private, where no human eye, but your own eyes are witness to it, are very difficult to prove.
Exactly.
In this particular case, it's very difficult. You see, your own eyes are witness to your own behavior.
But
and
sir,
such,
you know, so that's the
things are
point
made
being
then
raised, because the victim in
Yes,
this
yes.
particular has been supported by two other women. So there were three sets of human eyes who have witnessed what went on.
No,
and
I
corroborated
do
it as
agree.
well.
But out here, I would like to mention that very firm action has been taken against that particular officer.
How is it firm
now,
action?
First of
No,
all,
no, no, no.
as
I want to
understand-
come in. I want to come in, Commodore, because how is it firm action? There were 5 charges which were pressed against the accused officer. Only 1 was proven. That means delay in appointment of him picking up a rank. That is only 18 months delay. Now, is this plausible punishment for somebody where 3 individuals have come out and said that he sexually, emotionally, physically harassed us? Well, the jury is out there, but personally, I don't think so.
No. You see, first of all, you will have to understand how the court-martials are held. It is, first of all, one-man commission or inquiry commission was held. Inquiry was held. Thereafter, the CNC felt that it is not good enough. Then he ordered the board of inquiry. The board of inquiry recommended the court-martial, and then the matter went to the judge advocate and Navy judge advocate, and then he further, called for the court-martial. We have officers of very high caliber, very high moral standings. They went to the details of the whole thing, and finally it came to prove that there nothing is much in the allegations. There's nothing much in the allegations.
Yeah.
They are simply alleging. So therefore, they have proven only one particular charge, that is that he has not been becoming, his behavior has not been becoming of a officer, and he has been forfeited with 18 months of seniority, which is I think very adequate, because the quantum of punishment is always fitting the crime or the transgression. Out here we find that this officer, just for his so-called unbecoming of a character of an officer, he has been given he has been put behind 18 months from his postmates, which is going to be very detrimental to his career. So I think the whole thing has been, and moreover, I would like to tell you that the court-martials which are held in services are very immaculate. They are held under the Navy Act, which is still, I would say, are done like the British, the very superior. The order is very superior to what we have in our civil courts.
Sir, I would like to ask you a question. Does the Naval Act include the Sexual Harassment Act of today? Does it?
I don't know about it at the moment. But I am sure that the officers who constitute the court-martial, they must have taken into account the various sexual harassment laws and
Yes.
bylaws. They must have taken them into the account.
Yes.
It is not just that they have made a decision just
All
to
right.
let him off from these 4
All right,
charges.
Commodore,
No, it is not so.
Appreciate your point of view. At this point of time, Karuna wants to come in to make a point. Go ahead, Karuna.
There are a number of things I'm hearing. I'm hearing that the gravity of the offence, according to Commander Singh, was adequately dealt with. If you look at the gravity of the offence under our criminal law, if this gentleman had been a citizen in any other workplace, and possibly even in this case, then the victim can go to the criminal courts and it can be punished by a number of years in prison. Now, you seem to think that the adequate punishment here, if the charges were proven, and I also want to know what was it that was this cruel and unbecoming conduct that the gentleman was convicted for. Was it what was alleged, which was this kissing against her will or touching against her will? Is this something that, if in our normal criminal courts, is punished by many years in jail, suddenly we are hearing that under an archaic British law, which also penalizes someone for an extramarital affair a lot more than if somebody assaults a subordinate against her will, then it does seem to me that, the rules need to change.
Jugal, you want to come in?
Preeti, the point is, insofar as the Navy itself is concerned, I can just tell you this from a little bit of experience that one has got in this field, that recently the Navy, its own court-martial proceedings have come in for criticism at several quarters. I recall a very, very recent case where several of its commanders were dismissed, and then the higher courts actually came in and they said that no, you've been too severe, reinstate these officers. The feeling that one gets, and again we have been disadvantaged by the fact that we do not have access to the actual material, no one has. There is a feeling, Preeti, that perhaps this girl has paid the price for the Navy trying to, correct its overkill in several other cases. One doesn't know, maybe it's a balancing act. But the question that now stares at the organization is whether this was a case of poor investigation, whether they need to improve their prosecution skills, whether it's a case where women officers are misusing the law, or whether it's a case where perhaps the processes are not strong enough. The question is now staring at them, and it's time that the Navy actually perhaps comes clean and tells us just what it thinks, because this question, when it was put to senior officers in charge and aware of this case, the answer, as I said again, would come back to the point that, well, we do not know.
But nobody is saying that the women officers are misusing the law. So I think that, just because it's raised in other cases from the same patriarchal instinct which leads a particular kind of man to harass a woman, I think, we must be clear that here this is not something that is being raised.
Right, it's accepted that the Navy is an institution most revered, but at the same point of time, one which the Navy needs to accept is that it also needs to come out with maybe a little bit more transparency. We'll keep tracking the case for now. Karuna in the studio, Jugal, who's been following the story very closely, and we'll keep getting your reactions on that. Appreciate you joining us also. Commodore Singh, who joined us from Bangalore, appreciate it. Thank you.